On a cold April night in 1953, a college sophomore walked down the hall of his dormitory to pick up a clean set of bedsheets. Someone had played a prank on him. A fish left under his covers. He took the sheets. He walked back to room 225. He set an open psychology book on his desk, turned on the radio and left the lights burning. And then Ronald Tammen stepped out of that room and out of existence. His wallet stayed behind, his car keys, his car, even his coat on a night cold enough for snow. 73 years later, the question still stands. What happened to Ron Tammen? And why does the answer seem to involve the FBI, a hypnosis researcher, and a set of fingerprints that quietly vanished from government files in 2002? Oxford, Ohio, spring 1953. Miami University is a quiet campus of about 5,000 students, the kind of place where a missing person is unthinkable. Ronald Henry Tammen Jr. is 19 years old, a sophomore business major from Maple Heights, a suburb of Cleveland. And by every account, he is the last person on campus who would simply walk away from his life. Ron wrestles for the university team. He plays string bass in the campus Owls, the student dance band. Gigs on weekends, real money, a packed calendar. He's a brother at Delta Tau Delta, and he has a job with responsibility. Residence hall counselor in Fisher Hall, the man freshmen come to when something goes wrong. Friends describe him with one word above all others: conscientious. Ron shows up. Ron follows through. Fisher Hall itself deserves a mention. Before it housed students, the Victorian building was a private mental asylum called the Oxford Retreat. Students told ghost stories about it. In a few years, they would tell a different kind of story. Sunday, April 19, 1953. In the evening, around 8 o'clock, Ron finds the fish in his bed. A freshman's prank on the hall counselor. He carries his sheets downstairs, gets a fresh set from the hall manager, and heads back to room 225. According to the university, that was the last confirmed moment anyone saw him. But as we'll see, that may not actually be true. Around 10:30 that night, Ron's roommate, Chuck Findlay, comes back from a weekend away. The door is open. The lights are on. The radio is playing. Ron's psychology book lies open on the desk. Nothing alarming, except Ron never comes back. His wallet is in the room, his keys. His car sits in its usual parking spot, his string bass lying across the back seat, the instrument he needs for the band gigs that pay his way. Outside, it's snowing. His coat is still in the room. At first, Findlay assumes Ron stayed the night at his fraternity house. The next day, the Delts say he isn't there. The news moves slowly. This is 1953. No cell phones, no cameras, and days pass before the campus understands that Ron Tammen is gone. The university puts its dean of men, Carl Knox, in charge. Oxford police join in, then the county sheriff and state patrol. Fraternity brothers, dorm residents, and Air Force ROTC cadets comb the campus. Search parties walk the nearby woods. They find nothing, not a shoe, not a footprint that leads anywhere. Ron's mother contacts the FBI, and the Bureau opens a missing person file. By pure chance, Ron's fingerprints are already in the federal system, taken all the way back in 1941 when he was in the second grade. Officially, the FBI says there's no evidence of a crime, so the case doesn't meet their criteria. Unofficially, agents attend faculty meetings and quietly interview Ron's friends and family. For a case they claim not to be investigating, they seem remarkably interested. By Friday of that week, the university lands on an explanation: amnesia. Ron, they suggest, simply forgot who he was and wandered off. And there is something to support it. In June, a woman in the village of 7 Mile 12 miles east of campus, reports that on the very night of the disappearance, around midnight, a confused young man matching Ron's description knocked on her door and asked for directions. Then he walked away into the dark. She only connected it to Ron after seeing his photo in the paper. The amnesia theory has a problem, though, actually several. That summer, Ron's draft status changes, and when he fails to appear for his military physical, the FBI opens a second file, violation of the Selective Service Act. If Ron was out there, alive and aware, he was now technically a fugitive. That case was quietly closed in 1955. And then there are the details that never made it into the official story. Details that took decades and one stubborn local reporter to surface. In 1973, reporter Joe Cella of the Hamilton Journal-News uncovered something strange. 5 months before the disappearance, in November 1952, Ron had walked into the office of Dr. Garrett Boone, a physician in Hamilton, 10 miles from campus, for one purpose. He wanted his blood type tested. No one knows why. Students didn't just do that in 1952. When Dr. Boone tried to tell university officials about the visit after Ron vanished, he said they brushed him off. Cella kept digging. In 1976, he revealed a second buried lead. In August of '53, a university housing official vacationing in Wellsville, New York, 400 miles away, was certain he saw Ron in a hotel restaurant, dining with a group of young men. He reported it to Dean Knox the very next day. The public didn't hear about it for 23 years. Why would sightings and leads be left out of the record? What else didn't make the official story? Decades later, a researcher would find out. In 2010, a writer named Jennifer Wenger began reinvestigating the case, filing Freedom of Information requests, tracking down elderly witnesses, and publishing her findings over more than a decade. What she found reshaped the entire mystery. A note before we continue: much of what follows comes from her documented research, and where a claim is unverified, we'll say so. First discrepancy: the timeline. According to a first-hand account she recorded, Ron didn't vanish at 8 o'clock. He attended song practice at his fraternity house that evening and walked back toward the dorms after 10 p.m. with 2 freshman brothers, who said goodnight as he covered the last stretch to Fisher Hall alone. Dean Knox reportedly told those young men they may have been the last to see Ron, yet their walk appears nowhere in the university's narrative. Second, according to a man who served on the Oxford police force at the time, there was a report that late that night Ron was seen sitting in a car outside Fisher Hall with a woman. The car drove away. By his account, the lead was never investigated. This remains unconfirmed. Third, the psychology book. The open book on Ron's desk always seemed like proof of an evening interrupted mid-sentence. But according to Wenger's research, Ron had dropped his psychology course earlier that semester. There was no reason for him to be studying psychology at all. So why was that book open on his desk? Here the story takes its strangest turn. Ron's former psychology professor, Dr. St. Clair Switzer, was no ordinary academic. He was a hypnosis expert, a registered pharmacist, and a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve. Declassified documents reviewed by Wenger suggest Switzer was likely connected to Project Artichoke, the CIA's early 1950s program exploring interrogation, drugs, and hypnosis, a forerunner of MK Ultra. One of Ron's associates recalled men on the lawn of Fisher Hall in the fall of 1952, recruiting student volunteers for a hypnosis study. To be clear, no document has surfaced proving Ron took part in any such study, but the question hangs in the air. And there was pressure building in Ron's life. His grades were slipping. He'd fallen below full-time status, putting his student draft deferment at risk. Interviews gathered by Wenger also indicate Ron may have been gay or bisexual. In 1953, at the height of what historians call the Lavender Scare, when the U.S. government was purging gay men and women from its ranks, that alone could destroy a life. If true, Ron was a young man squeezed between the draft, the era's prejudice, and possibly something far bigger than himself. So the theories laid side by side. Amnesia, the official favorite. It fits the 7 Mile sighting, but struggles to explain how a man with no coat, no money and no memory left no further trace in a 12-mile radius. Voluntary disappearance. Ron saw the walls closing in and chose to vanish. It fits the blood test, which Wenger interprets as possible preparation for a new identity. It fits the Wellsville sighting. It struggles with everything we know about his character, and with the sheer difficulty of staying hidden for a lifetime. Foul play. Someone took Ron that night. It fits the uninvestigated report of the car and the woman. But no body, no evidence, and no suspect has surfaced in 73 years. When Fisher Hall was eventually demolished, onlookers half expected a grim discovery in its walls. There was nothing. And the fourth theory, the one Wenger herself came to favor, that Ron was recruited, that an intelligence agency in the business of making people disappear saw a bright, disciplined, vulnerable young man and made him an offer. For decades, that sounded like pure speculation. Then came 2002. That year, 49 years after the disappearance, the FBI expunged Ron Tammen's fingerprints from its files. The childhood card from 1941 and the digital copies. His family was never notified. Wenger obtained documents showing the deletion was carried out under either a court order or a request under the Privacy Act of 1974. Here's the detail that matters. A Privacy Act request of that kind, as a rule, comes from the person themselves. If that's what happened, then Ronald Tammen did not die on a snowy night in 1953. He was alive somewhere in the 21st century. A man in his late 60s who, half a century earlier, had set an open book on a desk and walked away from his own name. That interpretation is unproven, but no one has explained those missing fingerprints any other way. In 2008, investigators exhumed an unidentified body found in Georgia in July 1953 and compared its DNA with Ron's sister Marcia. It wasn't him. The one hard lead of the modern era. Closed. Ron's parents died without answers. His siblings grew old with the question. Miami University still tells the story of Fisher Hall, the dorm that was once an asylum and the counselor who never came back. The case remains open in the most literal sense. No body, no grave, no ending. Jennifer Wenger continues to publish her research and pursue records from the FBI and CIA at ronaldtammen.com. Ron Tammen was a wrestler, a bass player, a brother, a son. A 19-year-old who was, by every account, exactly where he was supposed to be every single day, until the night he wasn't. If this case stays with you the way it stayed with us, tell us in the comments which theory you find hardest to dismiss. And if you want more unsolved cases told carefully, state by state, subscribe. Ron's story deserved to be told right, so do the others.